the front window of his home on Delmar Lane in East Point, Georgia, and watched a man in a yellow polo shirt drive a for sale sign into the front yard, and felt, for the first time in months, like he could finally breathe. What Monique didn't know, what she couldn't have known, pulling her rolling suitcase up that same driveway just a few hours later, was that Darius had been building toward this moment for 93 days. She was coming home from a girls' trip. There was no girls' trip. Let me take you back to where this really starts. East Point, Georgia. A Thursday evening in early October. The kind of evening where the air still carries a little summer in it, but the light falls earlier now, and you start to notice. Darius had just come off a 10-hour shift supervising road construction on I-285 for GDOT Atlanta. His work boots were still on when he settled into the recliner. The television was on, some home improvement show Monique liked, but she wasn't there. She had left that morning for what she called a girls' weekend in Nashville. The girls. The usual crew. Third time that year. He wasn't suspicious. He was tired. There was a framed photo on the side table, the two of them at Tybee Island, maybe 3 years back. Monique laughing at something he'd said. He had always thought it was the best photograph he'd ever taken of her. He couldn't remember the last time he'd actually looked at it. He reached over and turned it slightly toward the wall, out of habit, because the glare from the lamp hit it at an angle that bothered him. Then he forgot about it. He was eating leftover rice and watching a man on television tear out perfectly good tile when his phone rang. Keisha's name on the screen. He almost didn't answer, but something, some small, unnamed thing sitting quietly in the back of his chest, made him pick up. Darius? Her voice was careful, rehearsed. Is Monique okay? Somebody told me she was posting about being in Nashville this weekend, but I've been home since Wednesday. My mama got sick. I haven't heard from her in 3 days. The rice went cold on the tray. He said, "She's fine. Must have gotten her wires crossed. I'll have her call you." He set the phone on the arm of the recliner. The man on the television was still working on the tile. The sound of it filled the room. Darius sat very still. Here's what I want you to understand about that stillness. For more than a year, Darius had noticed things he had not allowed himself to fully name. Monique coming home vague, not tired, not stressed, but specifically vague in the way people are vague when they have been somewhere they need to unremember before they walk through the door. Short answers, a phone that had migrated from the nightstand to her pocket. Dinners where she was present in the room but somewhere else behind her eyes. He had told himself, long marriage, busy lives, a plateau. He had told himself this because the alternative, that the distance was directional, that she was moving away from him rather than simply resting in place, required a confrontation he was not yet ready to have without something solid in his hands. He had been waiting, without realizing it, for the piece that made the picture make sense. Keisha had just handed it to him. He thought about a notification he had seen 3 weeks earlier. Passing through the bedroom, Monique's phone had lit up on the nightstand while she was in the shower. He had glanced at it without meaning to. A text preview from a contact saved only as Andre. A few words, something about running late. When she came out and saw the phone face up, she picked it up so smoothly, so quickly, that it barely made a sound. No explanation offered. No need to offer one, apparently. He had filed it away. He had told himself there was probably a reasonable answer. There wasn't. He understood that now. He turned off the television. He washed his bowl. He went to the back bedroom, the room with his old desk, the room Monique called his man cave and never came into, and he sat down in the quiet dark. He was going to find out the truth. All of it. And whatever it turned out to be, he was going to be holding it in both hands before it ever had the chance to surprise him again. Stay with me, because what Darius found when he started digging wasn't just an affair. It was something that had been hidden in plain sight for 2 full years. And it changes everything you think you know about this story. He found Terrence Blake through a colleague at GDOT, a man named Curtis who had navigated his own difficult divorce 2 years prior. Terrence was 52, former Atlanta PD, the kind of man whose quiet was full rather than empty, full of 15 years watching people do things they didn't want recorded. 2 chairs, a desk, a filing cabinet that had seen serious use. When Darius laid out what he knew, Terrence listened without interruption. Then he picked up his pen. "Give me 2 weeks," he said. It took 11 days. They met at Broad Street Cafe on Church Street in College Park. Nobody looked twice at 2 men talking quietly over coffee. Terrence slid the envelope across the table. Photographs. Monique and a man, lean, polished, the kind who selects his watch for the room, entering the Crown Plaza off Powers Ferry Road in Marietta. 2 occasions, daytime check-ins, her car in the lot both times. Andre Simmons, 43, sales manager at a luxury dealership in Sandy Springs. Then Terrence placed one more photograph down. Older, a corporate holiday party. Andre beside Monique, his hand on her shoulder. Not the way a colleague stands, but the way a man stands when he's already decided that shoulder is familiar territory. The date in the corner, 2 years ago. "This didn't start with girls' trips," Terrence said quietly. Darius set the photograph down, took one slow sip of coffee, did not speak for nearly a full minute. Then, what else is there? That question tells you everything. A person in freefall asks, "How could she?" and turns inward. Darius turned outward. He wanted more information, not more feelings. It is the single most protective thing a betrayed person can do. And most people cannot get there because the pain is too loud. That evening, he opened the joint credit card statements, accounts he had paid every month without scrutiny because scrutiny had not been part of how he understood their marriage. He found the pattern in 20 minutes. Gas charges in Sandy Springs, consistent, repeated. And on a supplemental card he had never authorized. Andre Simmons, approved user. Over $2,000. His card, another man's gas. Then he remembered. 2 weeks prior, Monique had used their shared family iPad in the kitchen, handed it back quickly. He had noticed, without registering it, that a second iCloud account briefly appeared in the top bar before she closed it out. He went to the iPad now. In the recently shared cache, still there, a folder name had synced before she logged off. New Life. Inside, apartment listings in Midtown Atlanta, lease comparisons, and a deposit receipt for a unit on West Peachtree Street drawn from their joint savings account. Dated 14 months ago. 14 months. That number reframes everything. An affair can sometimes be a failure of judgment, but a folder called New Life, with a deposit receipt from 14 months ago, is not a failure. It is a campaign. Monique had not drifted. She had been engineering her exit while Darius paid every bill and trusted every answer. He closed the iPad, sat in the dark of the back bedroom, let the full weight of it land. Not the grief of losing her, but the colder grief of understanding the thing he thought he had may never have fully existed. He sat with that for exactly as long as he needed to. Then he called Marcus J. Lang. Marcus kept an office on Peachtree Street downtown. Dark suits, thin-framed glasses, the stillness of a man moved only by facts. He listened. He reviewed everything. He asked 7 precise questions. Then he laid out the exact legal sequence. What Darius could do now, what had to wait until after filing, and what order mattered. 6 weeks later, Marcus filed the petition at Fulton County Superior Court, simultaneously moving to authorize the sale of the marital home given the documented misuse of joint funds. The hearing was scheduled. 6 weeks after that, the judge granted it. Darius signed the listing agreement on a Friday afternoon. The for sale sign went up Saturday morning. His phone buzzed 20 minutes later. Monique's name. A text. "Having the best time up here. Miss you, babe." He read it, set the phone face down on the counter, looked out the window at the sign in the yard. Then he went to make dinner. Before we go further, honest question for the comments. If you found a folder on your spouse's device labeled New Life, deposits already 14 months in, would you confront them that same night or go completely silent like Darius did? Yes or no below, because the answer determines everything that happens next. She came through the door at 4:17 in the afternoon. Darius knew the time because he had been watching the clock, the way he watched instrument readings at a job site, waiting for the number that confirms what the data already told him. He was in the living room, the newspaper open on his lap. He wasn't reading it. The deadbolt clicked. The door swung wide. Monique pulled her rolling suitcase across the threshold with practiced ease, sunglasses still on, the loose and familiar confidence of a woman returning from a trip she has made many times before. She carried the smell of hotel shampoo and a perfume she wore only when she was going somewhere she didn't talk about afterward. She made it 4 steps into the foyer, then she stopped. She had seen the yard. He watched the stillness move through her. Not the calm kind, but the kind that happens when the brain receives information it has no existing category for. Her hand frozen on the suitcase handle, her sunglasses still on her face. Her body caught between the momentum of walking in and the sudden need to understand what she was looking at. "Darius." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "What is that sign out there?" He folded the newspaper slowly, set it on the side table, looked at her with the steady, unhurried gaze of a man who has already made every decision that needed making. "We're selling the house," he said, "and we're getting a divorce." Here is what I want you to understand about this moment. When a person has been maintaining a double life for an extended period, they develop what psychologists call a contingency script, a mental rehearsal of the confrontation they know is eventually coming. They imagine their partner hurt, emotional, demanding answers. They prepare. What no contingency script accounts for is the discovery that the confrontation already happened, without them in the room. The shock Monique experienced was not simply the shock of being caught. It was the shock of realizing she had profoundly underestimated a man she had decided long ago was entirely predictable. That realization, the collapse of a long-held underestimation, does something specific to a person. It doesn't just change the present, it retroactively reframes everything they thought they knew. She pulled off the sunglasses. "You cannot do this." Her voice reaching for authority, the register she used when she needed to reset the dynamic in a room. "This is my home too. You do not get to sell this house without my consent." Darius stood. He crossed to the kitchen counter, picked up an envelope and held it out. Inside was a copy of the court order from Fulton County Superior Court. Authorized, signed, stamped. She read it once, then again, her eyes moving over the same lines the way eyes move when they're hoping the words will arrange themselves into something different. They didn't. She called Patricia, the attorney she had quietly retained 3 weeks prior, which told Darius more than she realized. The call lasted 4 minutes. When she hung up, the hand holding the phone dropped slightly. Patricia had been direct. The court order was valid, the petition properly filed, and Monique's path forward was through the proceedings themselves. There was no emergency injunction. There was no shortcut back. She sat down on the couch. He sat across from her in the armchair. He placed the manila envelope on the coffee table and slid it across. She looked at it, then at him. Then she opened it. What followed is what researchers call the collapse cascade, the rapid breakdown that occurs when every layer of a constructed story fails at the same moment. It moves in 3 phases. Watch for all 3. Phase 1. Emotion as deflection. The tears came immediately, not gradually, immediately, the way they come when a person has learned over a lifetime that tears create space, that they slow things down, that they have historically been enough to reset the room. Darius, please. This was a mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. I still love you. We can come back from this. He said nothing. I will end it right now. I will do whatever you need, whatever you need. He said nothing. She was in phase 1, reaching for the one tool that had always, reliably moved him. His patience, his decency, his fundamental willingness to believe the best of the people he loved. Then she reached the photograph from 2 years ago, Andre's hand on her shoulder at the company holiday party, and the tears stopped. Not gradually, like a switch. Phase 2, recalibration. She had forgotten Darius had attended that party. She had believed he left early. She searched her memory now, fast, trying to locate him in the room that night. She could not. She had not been paying attention to where he was. He had been right there. He always had been. How long have you known? Her voice was different now, flat. Long enough, he said. The credit cards, she said, the accounts. Filed and separated. Marcus handled it when the petition was filed. Nothing moves without court approval from here. Something moved across her face that was not grief. It was the rapid interior arithmetic of a person realizing that the financial landscape she had planned to navigate on her way out was no longer the landscape she was standing in. Phase 3. The reach for the backup. She stood, moved to the hallway, turned away from him, shoulders angled toward the wall, and pulled out her phone. He did not follow. He did not need to. She texted rapidly. He could see the motion of her thumbs from the armchair, could read the urgency in the set of her shoulders. Then she went still. She stared at the phone screen. One reply. She read it again. She set the phone face down against her thigh. Stop. That was all Andre had written. One word. No explanation. No call incoming. Nothing else. She tried calling. It went to voicemail on the second ring. Not the first, which would have meant blocked, but the second, which meant he saw the name and made the choice not to answer. She came back to the doorway between the hall and the living room and stood there. This is the turn no contingency script could have prepared her for. Andre Simmons had not simply ended things. Weeks earlier, when Marcus's office had formally notified him that he appeared in financial documentation being submitted to Fulton County Superior Court, that he was a named, authorized user on a credit account opened without the primary account holder's consent, which carried potential civil liability, Andre's attorney had advised him to act quickly. He signed a limited, factual statement confirming the relationship in exchange for being removed from the financial claims entirely. He had protected himself, completely, cleanly, and he had not told Monique he was going to do it. She had built her entire exit strategy around one belief, that Andre was her destination, her safe harbor, the reason the risk was worth it. He was a man with a wife and 2 children in Roswell who had just made the most rational decision available to him. She had not been chosen. She had been useful, and useful had an expiration date. Monique Kane stood in the doorway of her own living room and said, very quietly, to no one in particular, "He signed a statement." It wasn't a question. She had put the pieces together herself. Darius looked at her. He saw in her face the specific expression of someone watching the story they staked everything on dissolve. Not with noise, not with drama, but with the simple, final unavailability of the person she had counted on most. She had not just lost her husband that afternoon. She had lost the future she had been secretly constructing for over a year. And the man she had built it around had stepped away without a backward glance. She stood in that doorway for a long time. Darius stayed in the armchair. He did not speak. He did not offer comfort. There was nothing to say that the room wasn't already saying for both of them. Stay right there. Because what happened next inside Fulton County Superior Court was something Monique never imagined was possible. The moment the judge spoke, every story she had tried to tell about herself became part of the permanent record, and there was no taking it back. A person with nothing left to lose is not the same as a person who has given up. Monique had lost the house, the accounts, and Andre Simmons in the span of a single afternoon. But she still had her voice, and in the days that followed, she used it like the only tool she had left. She called her mother in Decatur. She reached out to 2 women from their church. She texted a former coworker of Darius's, someone she'd known from years of company cookouts and holiday parties. The story she told each of them was carefully consistent. Darius had grown cold and emotionally absent long before any of this happened. She had felt invisible in her own marriage for years. What she had done was a desperate mistake born from loneliness, not malice. She was a woman trying to find her way back. She never used the word affair. She used the word mistake. And she cried authentically because she had always been able to do that. Some people believed her. Then she called Darius's cousin Reggie. It was a misjudgment rooted in a reasonable assumption. Reggie had been warm to her throughout the marriage. He had danced with her at their wedding, given a toast at their housewarming, and always greeted her with a real hug rather than the obligatory kind. She had read his warmth as affection for her specifically. She had not understood that Reggie's warmth for her had always been downstream of something else entirely. A loyalty to Darius that ran back 40 years, to bicycles and summer and Flat Shoals Road. The distinction mattered. Reggie called Darius that same evening and repeated back, word for word, exactly what Monique had said, including the specific claim that Darius had been emotionally neglectful for years and that she had been pushed toward the choices she made. Darius thanked him. He called Marcus. What Monique was attempting is something researchers call narrative rehabilitation, the effort to reshape how your story is received by your social network before the other side of it reaches them. And here's the difficult truth about it. It often works, particularly when the person on the other side is private by nature, does not seek sympathy, and does not broadcast their pain. Which described Darius precisely. He had told no one. He had asked for nothing. But narrative rehabilitation has one structural weakness. Every person you tell your story to is a potential exit point. The moment one of them walks out and crosses to the other side, you lose control of the version. Reggie walked out, and when Marcus added the documented smear campaign to the supplemental filing, noting that Monique had made specific false claims of neglect to members of their shared community while the proceedings were active, it became one more entry in an already substantial record of bad faith. She had been trying to change the story. She had inadvertently added another chapter to the case against her. Fulton County Superior Court. The building on Pryor Street in downtown Atlanta has a particular quality on weekday mornings. Tall windows, marble floors, the low murmur of attorneys in the corridor reviewing notes. It is a room built to reward preparation and expose improvisation. Monique arrived with Gerald, the attorney she had retained 3 weeks prior. Confident handshake, organized briefcase. She wore charcoal gray. Her hair was done carefully. She sat straight-backed, the posture of a woman who had decided that dignity, at least, was still within reach. Marcus J. Lang arranged his materials on the table with the unhurried calm of a man who has never needed to perform confidence because he has never lacked it. He did not open with argument. He opened with the record. The photographs from Terrence Blake, time-stamped, geolocated, spanning 8 months. Hotel entrances and parking receipts from 14 separately documented meetings. The supplemental credit card, opened in Monique's name with Andre Simmons as authorized user, carrying over $2,000 in charges. Darius's name on the underlying account. His prior knowledge of the card? None. The iPad cached folder labeled New Life, apartment listings, lease comparisons, and a deposit receipt for a unit on West Peachtree Street drawn from the joint savings account. Dated 14 months before the divorce petition was filed. Andre Simmons's signed statement, confirming the relationship, confirming the timeline, confirming that Monique had communicated her intent to leave the marriage. Submitted through his attorney, factual and limited in scope. And finally, the supplemental record of Monique's post-filing statements to community members, including the documented claim that Darius had been emotionally neglectful, submitted alongside Reggie's written account of the specific language she had used. Gerald reviewed the materials across the table. He leaned over once and said something quietly to Monique. She gave a very small shake of her head. He had prepared for a disputed narrative between two people with conflicting accounts of a deteriorating marriage. He had not prepared for a forensic reconstruction of a 14-month exit strategy, documented to the dollar and the date, paired with a post-filing smear campaign that was now also on the record. The difference between those two cases is not a matter of degree. It is a matter of category. Marcus did not characterize Monique in his presentation. He did not call her manipulative or cold or calculating. He introduced no language designed to make the judge feel a particular way about her as a person. He simply laid the documents down in chronological order and allowed the record to speak. This is what skilled attorneys call letting the facts carry the moral weight. It is far more effective than editorializing, because it removes any surface for the other side to push against. You cannot rebut a dated receipt. You cannot cross-examine a time-stamped photograph. Gerald had no effective response. There was none available. The judge, a woman in her late 50s, reading glasses on a lanyard, the particular economy of movement that comes from years on the bench, reviewed each exhibit without expression. She asked 2 clarifying questions. She did not ask a third. Her ruling was measured and precise. No spousal support. The division of the home sale proceeds to follow Georgia's equitable distribution statute, adjusted for the documented unauthorized use of marital funds. Monique to contribute to Darius's documented legal costs, attorney fees, and investigation expenses under Georgia's OCGA Section 19-6-2, citing evidence of financial bad faith established by the unauthorized credit account and the misappropriation of joint savings. Gerald leaned over and said something quietly to Monique. She did not respond. Instead, and this was the thing Darius would remember long after everything else faded, she reached up and straightened her jacket. Slowly. Smoothed the front of her dress with both hands. A small reflexive gesture of composure, reaching for something that was no longer there. Not tears, not anger, just the instinct to look put together, deployed one final time in a room that had just finished putting her on the record as something else entirely. It was, in its way, the saddest thing Darius had seen all day. He shook Marcus's hand in the corridor. He buttoned his jacket. He walked through the lobby and down the front steps of the Pryor Street Courthouse into the November afternoon. He stood on the sidewalk. Traffic on Pryor Street. A pigeon moving across the steps without urgency. Somewhere downtown, a church bell marking the hour. He breathed. The air felt clean, the way air smells after a long, hard rain, when something that needed to move through finally has. he walked to his truck. He had a road project to review in the morning, and he did not want to be late. Keep watching, because 2 years after that courthouse, a letter arrived at Darius's door. And the final paragraph of that letter contains a truth darker than anything that happened in that courtroom. Once you hear it, you'll understand why he put it in a drawer and never looked at it again. The house on Delmar Lane sold in 22 days. Good bones, the agent said. Great neighborhood. The buyers were a young couple, a toddler in tow and another baby arriving in the spring, and they had stood together in the front yard on a Sunday afternoon, holding hands, while their little one crouched in the grass and turned over leaves, one by one, like each one was worth investigating. Darius had watched them from inside before the showing began and thought, good, that yard always deserved that. He signed the final closing paperwork at a title company on Washington Road, received his share of the proceeds, and drove north on I-85 to his new apartment in College Park. Second floor, 2 bedrooms, a balcony overlooking the parking lot, and, past it, the flat roof of a tire shop and a long slice of December sky. Smaller than Delmar Lane. He liked it more than he expected to. 3 weeks after the closing, Aaliyah called. She was 24, Monique's daughter from a relationship that predated Darius by several years. He had stepped into her life when she was 7 years old, and he had shown up in every way that counted in the years that followed. School plays, SAT prep sessions on Sunday mornings, a rainy Saturday afternoon in a Home Depot parking lot in Lithonia teaching her how to change a tire, while she complained the whole time and remembered every step. He had never legally adopted her. Monique had kept that boundary firm throughout the marriage, in a way he had never fully pressed her on, but he had raised her in every way that mattered. She was, in the quiet ledger he kept of things that were real and things that weren't, one of the realest things the marriage had produced. She asked if they could meet. They sat in a booth at Refuge Coffee on Ponce de Leon Avenue in Decatur. Warm light, exposed brick, the low hum of an afternoon crowd. Aaliyah had her hair in a bun, and her eyes were red from a cry that had happened before she arrived. She wrapped both hands around her mug like she needed something solid to hold. "I'm sorry, Darius. I didn't know how bad it was. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't." She stopped, steadied herself. "I'm just sorry." He looked at her across the table. This young woman he had watched grow up, and he saw, in the careful way she was holding herself together, not Monique, but someone bracing to absorb fallout from a choice she had never made and had no part in. "Aaliyah," he said, "you don't have to choose a side. She is still your mother. That doesn't change because she made choices that ended our marriage." She looked up, not entirely certain she had heard correctly. "You're not angry at me?" she said. "Why would I be angry at you?" This moment, quiet, easy to overlook between the larger events of the story, is one of the most revealing in the entire arc. When a marriage ends in betrayal, there is always a radius of damage. People who had nothing to do with the decision get caught in it. Children, extended family, people forced to take positions before they have the full picture. What Darius did in that coffee booth was refuse to extend the damage. He made a deliberate choice to hold Aaliyah entirely outside his grief, to absorb the full weight of the ending himself and let her stay whole. He did not use her as an audience for his pain or as confirmation of his righteousness. Psychologists call this protective differentiation. It is rare, and it is available only to people whose healing is genuine, not performed. She cried quietly then, the way a person cries when they have been tensed against a weight they expected to carry, and someone they trusted simply lifts it without fanfare. He handed her a napkin, ordered her a refill. They stayed for another hour, talking about her new job at a PR firm in Midtown and a black and white film photography class she had started on weekends, the kind that requires you to commit to the shot before you see what you've got. When they stood to leave, she held on for a long time. "I'll still call you," she said. "I know," he said. The 2 years that followed were not dramatic. They were not meant to be. What Darius remembered from that time were not events, but moments. The first morning, he cooked breakfast without thinking about timing it for someone else. Eggs and toast, unhurried, the radio on low. The evening, he sat on the balcony and looked up from a book and realized he hadn't checked his phone in 4 hours and had not noticed. A text from Aaliyah one afternoon. A photograph she had taken in her film class, black and white, a park bench empty in the winter light, and his reply, one word, "Beautiful." Her response, a moment later, a single small heart. He took on an expanded role at GDOT. He started going to his brother Calvin's church in Hapeville on Sunday mornings, not from sudden conviction, but because Calvin asked every week without pressure, and because the congregation ran a Thursday evening fish fry that proved, fairly quickly, to be worth attending on its own terms. He did not think about Monique often. When he did, the sharpness he had anticipated was not there. What replaced it was something quieter and in some ways more complete. An understanding that he had made every right decision available to him, and that making every right decision does not stop people from choosing to leave. It only determines how you carry yourself when they do. He had carried himself well. He knew that without needing anyone to confirm it. It was a Tuesday morning in early April. The Bradford pear trees on his street were in full white bloom, the kind of morning that smells like the year starting over. He swung by the mailbox on his way back from an early site check, still in his work boots, coffee in hand, thinking about the day's schedule. He almost missed it in the stack of utility notices and grocery circulars, a letter forwarded from Delmar Lane. Monique's handwriting, his name in blue ink on the front. He stood in the parking lot of his building and looked at it for a moment, just held it, not with dread exactly, but with the careful attention of a man who has learned not to underestimate what a piece of paper can contain. Then he went upstairs, set it on the kitchen counter, made himself a full cup of coffee, and sat down at the table before he opened it. It was 4 pages, all handwritten. She was in Stone Mountain now, part-time work at a dental office. Andre Simmons had returned to his family in Roswell within 3 months of the divorce. There was no one else. The letter was measured and careful, the prose of a person who had spent a long time in therapy learning to organize what they needed to say, and had finally decided to say it. She acknowledged the specific harm she had caused. She described what the past 2 years had taught her. She said she wanted him to know she understood, now, the full weight of what she had done. He read all 4 pages, and then he reached the last paragraph, and the last paragraph was not like the rest of the letter. Don't stop now. What Monique wrote in those final lines is the truth underneath everything. The thing she had never been able to say out loud until there was nothing left to lose by saying it. And once you hear it, you'll understand why Darius put that letter in a drawer and never opened it again. The last paragraph read, "There is something I should have told you a long time ago, and I have spent 2 years in therapy trying to understand it well enough to say it honestly. I told myself I loved you. I said the words, and I meant them as best I could. But looking back now, I think what I truly loved was the safety you gave me, the certainty of you, the steadiness. And somewhere along the way, I confused those 2 things. I confused being safe with being happy. I confused being cared for with being in love. And rather than face that confusion honestly, I looked for the answer somewhere else and destroyed everything in the process. I don't know if that is worse than knowing, but I think you deserve to know the difference. You always deserved more honesty than I gave you." He read it once. He set it face down on the kitchen table. He picked up his coffee cup. It had gone cold while he was reading. He set it back down. Outside the balcony door, a sparrow landed on the railing and sat there in the April light, chest puffed against the breeze, and then lifted away without ceremony. He did not move for a long time. There was no clean name for what he felt in that kitchen. It was not the grief of losing someone who had been fully present and then gone. It was something older and more complicated. The grief of a man reading a confirmation of something he had suspected at some quiet cellular level for a long time, and had spent 9 years choosing not to suspect. She had not stopped loving him. She had confused the structure of what he gave her with the feeling she was looking for, and had spent the better part of a decade unable to tell the difference. That was not cruelty exactly. It was a kind of tragic self-blindness, the sort that harms everyone it touches, including the person doing the confusing. He understood that. He sat with it. He did not rush past it. What Monique described in that final paragraph is something therapists encounter frequently, though it rarely gets named this directly. Researchers call it security-motivated attachment, the pattern where a person enters and sustains a long-term relationship not from deep romantic love, but from a genuine need for stability, safety, and emotional grounding that they cannot provide for themselves. It is not predatory exactly. It is not always even conscious. People in this pattern often genuinely believe they love their partner because the comfort and security they feel is real, and they have confused it for the larger thing. The tragedy is that from the outside, and often from the inside, it looks identical to a real marriage. It has all the same structures, the same rituals, the same surface warmth. What it lacks is full mutuality. One person is all the way in. The other is in as far as they are capable of going, which may not be all the way. Darius had been all the way in, and reading those 4 pages, he finally understood why it had sometimes felt, in the quietest moments of their life together, like he was the only one fully in the room. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time after folding the letter. He did not feel peace yet. He felt something harder to name, not grief and not relief, but something between them, the way the sky looks between night and dawn when it is neither yet. He made a second cup of coffee. He did not finish it. Eventually, he went outside. He stood on the balcony in the April morning, with the city spread out in front of him and the Bradford pear trees visible from where he stood, white and indifferent and going about their business. He breathed. He let the air move through him. Then he went back inside, folded the letter carefully along its original creases, and placed it in the kitchen drawer, beneath the takeout menus and the spare batteries and the instruction manual for his coffee maker that he had never once consulted. He closed the drawer. He did not open it again. I want to say something about that choice, because it is easy to mistake it for avoidance. Darius did not burn the letter. He did not call Aaliyah to share it. He did not bring it into future conversations. He did not make it the center of gravity around which he organized the rest of his life. Therapists who work with people recovering from betrayal call this completing the grief without re-engagement, the difficult, deliberate act of fully receiving a painful truth, sitting with it long enough to understand it, and then declining to carry it forward as your primary identity. There is a pull in pain like this to keep returning, to examine it, to share it until it becomes what people know you for, to let the wound become the person. Darius chose differently. He received the truth, he honored its full weight, and then he put it in a drawer, in the back of the kitchen, behind the things he used every day. That is not suppression. That is completion. And completion, in the end, is the only thing that actually heals. A week later, he ran into Keisha at the Publix on Old National Highway. She had cantaloupe in her cart and was reading the back of a yogurt container with focused, personal suspicion. She looked up, and her face shifted. The genuine warmth of someone who had cared about him throughout all of it. "You look good, Darius. You really do." "I feel better," he said. She nodded. Monique's doing okay over in Stone Mountain. Getting by. A pause. I thought you should know. I know, he said. She wrote me. Keisha studied him for a moment, the way people look at someone when they are checking to see if the okay is real. Then she put the yogurt in her cart. You're a good man, she said. You always were. He thanked her. He got his groceries. He drove home in the ordinary afternoon light with the windows down. That evening, Darius Kane stood on the balcony of his second-floor apartment in College Park with a cup of coffee that had gone slightly cooler than ideal, and he looked out over the parking lot and the flat roof of the tire shop, and the long slice of sky above it all, going pale orange now as the sun pulled back behind the tree line. He was not waiting for anything. That was the thing that struck him, standing there. For the first time in more years than he could accurately count, there was nothing approaching that required bracing. No sound in the parking lot that might be her car. No late notification that needed an explanation. No small, unnamed weight sitting at the center of his chest, waiting to be understood. Just the evening, the coffee. The birds moving through the orange light on their way to wherever birds go at the end of the day. He was 46 years old. He had built his life on honest ground, and when something dishonest had moved into the foundation, he had removed it. Not with rage, not with noise, not with any performance of suffering, but with patience, documentation, and the quiet willingness to face the truth all the way to the end of it. He had come out the other side. Not unscathed, not the same as he was before, but standing and building and present for the first time in a long time in his own life. The for sale sign came down from that yard on Delmar Lane. A young family lives there now. A little girl turns over leaves in the grass in the afternoon, examining each one like it might be worth knowing. She does not know anything about what happened in that house before she arrived. And she doesn't need to. What matters is what the yard is now. This story teaches us three things worth writing down. First, when something in a marriage feels consistently off, not dramatic, just quietly wrong, like a door that never quite closes flush, do not explain it away for another season. Name it. One honest conversation, even an uncomfortable one, costs far less than a year of silence that the other person is using to plan their exit. Second, documentation is not coldness. It is self-respect with paperwork. If you ever find yourself in a situation where trust has been broken, write down dates, keep records, and consult an attorney before you confront anyone. Emotion without evidence is just noise. Evidence without emotion is power. Third, and this one is for the ones who loved someone who was only ever partly there. You did not fail. You loved correctly. The gap was never in you. Put the letter in the drawer, go make coffee. Then go outside and see what the light is doing. That is enough. That has always been enough. Every line in these emotional stories comes from real human insight and lived experience. AI was used only to enhance clarity and pacing, allowing deep lessons about kindness, systemic bias, and personal strength to resonate with a global audience. Production team story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Wynn. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Wynn. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.